podcast, we are going to be talking about and finishing off with the FA Cup. So obviously it's the FA Cup third round coming up this weekend as well. Some amazing games coming up. I'm going to the Man United versus Everton game tomorrow. Probably one of the biggest ties in the tournament so far. Obviously the biggest is Chelsea versus Man City on Sunday evening. But realistically speaking, guys, I wanted to know kind of your thoughts on the FA Cup. Is it still a relevant trophy? Is it still as big as it used to be? And what are your kind of favourite FA Cup memories? So Sukhi, being a Spurs fan, it's been very difficult for you over the last few years as well, being in an FA Cup as well, because you've got to a couple semi-finals, quarterfinals, but realistically speaking, Antonio Conte could do a job for you in this FA Cup. That's how I'm seeing it. But
yeah, again, I don't see it happening. I reckon we'll probably play against freaking Forest or something away, end up losing like 2-1 in extra time. So I'm not really counting. I'm not putting all my eggs in my basket for that. So I'm just happy just to try and get to top four at least. I think that's our main focus, and try and do a decent run in the Champions League to try and make an effort. But in terms of FA Cup, it's still a trophy that's up for grabs, right? So you always got to play for it. But I think in terms of the scale, and you've seen the beauty of the FA Cup, the shock exits that we get. I think we're prominently known, like Middlesbrough last year absolutely annihilated us. So
Jed Spence.
Yeah, Jed Spence and the guys. So
Jed Spence was at Nottingham Forest, and then you had the other right back who was really good as well. So that's what I remember about Nottingham Forest last season.
Fantastic. Well, Middlesbrough owned Spence, didn't they? But he was on loan at Forest, so then obviously So I think looking at it again, we could probably play our second string. But if you look at our second string in terms of our bench subs, they're not up to scratch for it really. So
you got Portsmouth tomorrow though. It should be an easy game. You would imagine.
Portsmouth away, you never know. You'll end up losing like 2-0.
You're home.
We are home.
You're home.
Yeah. Again, I'm not really excited so much, man. Honestly,
that's answered my question. It's not as exciting as other competitions now as well for a Spurs fan. As being in the Champions League as well, it's just another competition.
I don't think that for a West Ham fan either. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the West. I'm not a huge fan of the FA Cup. For a team like West Ham, there are two ways you can look at it. You can look at it as like, oh yeah, this is a chance for us to win a trophy this season because you only come up against a certain amount of Premier League teams, and then you beat one of the big boys, and then you're through to the semis, and then you get a Wembley trip. But like, for example, we got Brentford away. And I'm just not interested in it. Like, I know Brentford are going to turn up thinking we're going to go really full out for this, and the FA Cup for me has lost so much credibility over the last 4 or 5 years. I think COVID hasn't helped, because I think after COVID, where like I couldn't even tell you, and this might just be my ball knowledge, but I couldn't tell you who the last FA Cup final was, like who the two teams were.
I remember Liverpool won against
penalties to Chelsea. Yeah, that took us a while to figure that out. Yeah, Danny was right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, usually before it was like, who was in the, like, if we asked about the Champions League final, we asked about the Europa League final. You can tell yourself in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
For me, and this is the most interesting part about it, recently I've been really getting into non-league football. I've been loving the National League and the National League South. Haven't had a chance to look at the National League North just because of location. But there are a couple of teams in here which I think can really do a shift. I think Boreham Wood at home against Accrington, that could be an upset. That's a National League team taking out a League Two team. I really love the idea of Wrexham going away to Coventry this weekend and picking up.
My friends are mad about Wrexham. They've never been to Wrexham, but because of this FX documentary of Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, they just love Wrexham now. They know all the players. They play with them on FIFA. I'm like, why? And it's like, because of the documentary, because of Ryan Reynolds. I'm like, okay, cool. Do what you need to do in it. It's Ryan Reynolds. If you like him, you like him. But it's quite crazy to see how Wrexham can come up in that kind of way as well. But no, I'm glad you mentioned the lower league teams. One big game for me. It's not a big game at all, but for me personally, Stockport County versus Walsall, Sunday. I think it's at 2:00 as well. Yeah. And that's basically because Walsall, I've scouted for Walsall in the past as well. It's my local team. It was my local team once upon a time. They're in the third round of the FA Cup for the first time in a long time as well. So this could be a chance where they could beat a team and get into the fourth round and have a major tie. The last time Walsall Football Club played a big team in rather the League Cup or the FA Cup was against Jose Mourinho's Chelsea in 2015-16. So that was a home game. That was a really big game. So as you mentioned about Wrexham, and for people who have known about like the Wrexham documentary of Ryan Reynolds and stuff, when it's a non-league game or a lower league game and they get a home tie against a really big opposition, things go to town for them as well. And it works so well financially. It benefits them really well. Realistically speaking, I think it's more the magic of the cup is definitely going to be for some of these smaller teams with beating the bigger teams as well. We want to see giant killings. I don't want to see us lose to Everton, but we want to see some giant killings as well. Forest Green Rovers,
that mock, that circus, the Frank Lampard circus.
I want to get Frank Lampard sacked. I want to get him sacked on Friday night.
I don't think you will, but it will just be funny to watch. I think you pick up a 1 or 2-0 win. Jordan Pickford could have another howler. Or any of the players that on that team. Watching that game against Brighton, I know Brighton are a very well-drilled side, and Zerbi is doing a great job. But Jesus Lord, that was tough to watch. That was
even the highlights was tough to watch as well. Just embarrassing.
Calamity of errors is what it was. It's just a calamity of errors.
Danny, who else is on your list for the FA Cup? There, you were just going through a list then.
Do you have any more?
What, the non-league sides?
Yeah, the non-league sides. Yeah.
Let me have a. I don't.
Oxford are playing Arsenal, aren't they?
Yeah. I think that's away,
Oxford at home.
Forest Green are playing Birmingham. Forest Green obviously being League One. They've done well over the last couple of years. An interesting one, Gillingham, one of my local clubs, who are the only affiliated EFL club in Kent. They've just been bought by American owners.
Wow.
They're currently sitting bottom of League Two. And they've just been bought by American owners, and they've got Leicester at home. So if Gillingham were to pull out a result, that would be a real big boost to any Gillingham fan out there that's going to be looking at that game thinking, what can we do with that?
What games are on TV? Let me have a look. So Man United, Everton. Then you've got Sheffield United versus Newcastle. Then Liverpool versus Wolves. The only non-league one or the lower league one that we can see is Oxford versus Arsenal on Monday. I think that's a travesty. Like normally they'd have a big game.
It's infrastructure, Hamz. It's infrastructure. The stadiums. If they can hold the capacity of all these cameras, but yeah.
It's like with VAR being at some and not being at others as well, which is crazy to really see as well. But yeah, no, I get your point of view. So I have to have like the limited cameras.
Danny's got more. Danny's borrowing more. Go ahead.
I'm looking at it. All the other ones look fairly straightforward. Hartlepool at home to Stoke. Hartlepool obviously being a National League side or a League Two side, just promoted from the National League. They're a bit of a yo-yo team at the moment between the National League and League Two. Stoke sitting quite well in the 18th in the Championship.
They're not doing good. They're not doing good, bruv. I'm looking at Stoke, and I'm just hearing it from my friends locally in Stoke, and they're just like not happy with some players. And I'm like, oh, I know that player, and he used to be good like 6 years ago. Now it's crap. Like we're talking about people like Phil Jagielka and like Glenn Whelan and people like that, and Joe Allen, and you're like, oh my days, they still play. It's crazy to see how they still play, which is crazy. But yeah, just to wrap up the podcast, everyone, name a couple of your favorite FA Cup memories. I'd love to hear it. Obviously, Danny, you've been a West Ham fan. Did you have any specific West Ham moments that you thought, this was a sick moment in the FA Cup?
Absolutely. When I was taught about the FA Cup, it was unfortunately during the times of the League Cup and West Ham, Liverpool, and in the Millennium Stadium and the loss there. But I was always taught about 1964, that famous West Ham side, Jeff Hurst, Bobby Moore lifting the World Cup, our first World Cup. That was 1966. Lifting the FA Cup in 1964. But a most recent FA Cup memory is Adrian against Everton penalty shootout. He's just saved a penalty in the sudden death actions of the penalties. He whips off his gloves, throws them to the floor, and then slots away his penalty and runs into the stands of the Boleyn ground too. It was one of the last games at Upton Park. So for him to have that moment, it made him a legend for about 3 weeks until he made another mistake. And then he was back to being, for God's sake, Adrian's made another mistake. But I remember watching it on TV. It was a late night. And for him to pull off the gloves and then absolutely pack Pickford into the corner and then run into the crowd, great moment, great memory.
Nicely done. It was good to see how West Ham did in that tournament. I think you tend to go around quarterfinals, but it's been a while since you've been to a semi-final, so it would be good to see you on a cup run as well going forward. Sukhi, how about you from a Spurs point of view as well? Have you had any very good memories from them? I'm not talking about the time when you had to play Vinicius against that non-league side and he scored and he did that. Do you remember when he did that? That Mbappe celebration. Who was that against? I forgot the team.
Flipping out. They were up north somewhere, man. I think they were near us in the East Midlands. It's like a random team.
No, it was in Liverpool, I think. Let's have a look.
Was it Liverpool?
Yeah,
it was up north. It was up north somewhere. Yeah, it was. The pitch was atrocious. And we're playing Bale. So yeah, but I think for us as a Spurs one, the kind of most recent one is probably our comeback win against Wycombe Wanderers when we won 3-2, scored a last minute winner.
The mighty Wycombe. The mighty,
you know what I mean?
Wycombe.
That's how bad it is. Yeah, freaking Akifem was just bullying the shit out of us in that game. So I mean, just to claw that. But I mean, and when you look at like the finals, obviously that's what you look at the most. You're looking at like Drogba against United. It was 08, the little chip, the 1-2.
07, extra time.
Yeah, then you look at Man City against United, that 1-0, where that was the tide where it was changing, where City were starting to come into. I think that was the
semi-final.
Wasn't it a final? I'm sure they played you in a final, no?
Semi-final, Yaya Toure, and then they beat Stoke in the final.
Yeah, I mean, even then, like that's a memorable moment where they kind of transitioned. Oh yeah, because they played Stoke, didn't they? Yeah, sorry, not Stoke. Who did they play against?
Yeah, Stoke. Stoke in the final.
Jeez, memories, man. So yeah, I mean, when you look at that, Man City, that was the kind of transition for them to start becoming a big team and then start winning their trophies. So I mean, there's loads of moments in the FA Cup. This kind of shock exit. Obviously, our one when we lost to freaking Middlesbrough, so that's been one of them. So I think they're all bad moments for me at the moment. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it, it's always good for like cup upsets. But then when it kind of alludes to what Danny was saying in terms of you looking at us as Spurs and West Ham fans, and we're kind of saying to you like, really, it's not really realistic enough for us as a team, because you get to those latter stages, you've always got City there, you've always got Chelsea, you've always got Liverpool, you'll end up having United, and it always ends up being a Premier League or kind of final. You never really get any kind of deep teams, so it's not really the greatest in terms of that kind of being competitive. But from the early stages, there's a bit of kind of competitiveness, and I think that's where we get kind of the little short clip videos of where shocked little teams in League Two beat a Premier League team. But again, when you get to the latter stage, it just gets boring and mundane. It's a bit similar to the League Cup as well, the same kind of format where you get Man City there every year, so it gets repetitive after a while.
Yeah, I can agree as well, because even now we've got Chelsea versus Man City third round again, but we all know Man City are going to go all out and Chelsea aren't in the best of forms. The game's probably started as well in the Premier League, which we'll watch after this as well. But yeah, realistically speaking,
interesting concept has come to my head. I really like how they do. I don't even know what the competition's called. I think it's like the Papa John's Trophy, where in the lower leagues, instead of playing a knockout stage, they do group stages.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that could be really interesting in terms of if you randomized 4 teams. And I know they mentioned a load of things today actually about how they wanted to increase under 23 teams and youth teams into the Carabao Cup.
Yeah,
but maybe that could be the new way to spice it up in terms of if you separate all the Premier League teams, you do 20 groups. And then that way everyone gets a couple of extra cup games a season. They can play them on certain weekends of the year. The big teams are going to get their away day. The home teams are going to get their chance to go and put on a show. And I think that might be potentially a new way of doing it. Even if you do 10 groups, or I don't even know how it would work, like a World Cup format over a course of a season. Where
it could cause a lot of burnout, to be fair, as well, when you're thinking about it.
That's the only thing I'm thinking of now, because obviously some teams like West Ham, they go, oh no, we've been eliminated from the Carabao Cup, let's move on.
Yeah.
So if they were
it's like with the Nations League in a way, you've kind of got the international friendlies where you can trial and error, now turn into the Nations League where you're getting relegated. And because it's now a league, people are then criticizing the manager and the players a lot because they're not turning up for these games, where they're in their mind, they're thinking it's just another friendly as opposed to qualification for the World Cup. Because what do they do when they get top of the group? They end up playing in the final, or if they don't, they get promoted to another group, which is crazy as well. So yeah, lots to think about in that kind of way. And yeah, my favorite memories from the FA Cup, winning in 2016 and 2004. It's more sad memories, kind of more than anything. But you always want to remain optimistic. It's Man United's best time to actually secure a trophy with the form that we've got going on as well, with the players that we've got finally in this team as well. Realistically speaking, though, one of my favorite FA Cup memories involves Wigan beating Man City at Wembley for the FA Cup. That was a proper. Was it Ben Watson, Sean Maloney corner? Yeah, it's crazy when you think about it. The players that they had on the pitch: Tevez, Aguero, Nasri. You look at some of these players: Roberto Mancini, prime Mancini, and prime Man City at the time as well. And you're just like, okay, Roberto Martinez, going from Wigan to Everton to becoming the Belgian manager, all started from there. If Ben Watson doesn't score against Man City, they get relegated as usual, and they become finalists in the FA Cup, and they just go down and they never come back up because they've not been back up in the Premier League since then. Wigan, that was their last big hurrah in the top flight, being FA Cup winners and then get relegated the same season as well, which is crazy. But for me, that's always a memory that stands out for me, from what I've kind of seen as well. You remember the giant killings as well, which is always good. I always remember, I think it was Newport County beating Leicester for some reason. I remember watching it. I think it was during lockdown. That's why I remembered it quite a lot, because there's all these games on. We had nothing to do. It was lockdown still as well in the winter. I'm like, okay, cool, let's watch some FA Cup games. And I remember just watching it and remember just talking to my wife about the different types of FA Cup games and why it goes to penalties and why it goes to extra time and why there's replays. And I just really enjoyed that as well. Getting to watch games like that as well, which is really good fun. But yeah, nicely done, everyone. Look forward to seeing you all again soon. Like I said to you both privately, you're always welcome to come on whenever you want on the podcast, because I'm looking forward to this year and the plans that we've got going forward, which will be good fun. But no, thanks for your time, everyone.